All right, we're going to go ahead and get started so that we can respect everybody's time. I'm Cami Murray. I'm the Development and Outreach Coordinator at CVI, and I'm really excited to have all of you join us today for Building Idaho's Clean Energy Future, which is part of Green Tie 2021. We really appreciate you being here to learn more about our work. And if you haven't yet, we encourage you to go to the CVI Green Tie website and check out all the great activities we have happening this week and learn a little more about how you can support CVI. And that website is cvidaho.org/greentie. So it's pretty easy to get there. So today we're going to be learning about how a clean energy transition can be an asset to building Idaho's economy, keeping Idaho's communities healthy, and helping to protect the wild spaces that we love. In the next hour, CVI's Programs Associate, Ryan McGoldrick, will share how Conservation Voters for Idaho is helping to make this transition in a proactive, equitable, and intentional way through our climate, energy, and transportation policy work. So we've got one quick housekeeping announcement before we get started. So you will notice that you are all muted. So if you have any questions, please do just drop those in the chat. You can also use the Q&A feature if you prefer, and we will get to your questions. And then, of course, if we don't get to your question, hopefully we should get to all of them. But as always, don't feel hesitant to reach out to us personally, either to myself or Ryan after the webinar, and we'll be happy to chat with you some more. So I think that's all I've got. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Cami. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then I will open up this PowerPoint and get started. Okay, so as Cami said, I'm going to be talking about our Clean Energy for All campaign. So that's about building Idaho's clean energy future. I'm Ryan McGoldrick, our program associate, and I work on our climate, clean energy, and transportation policies. I also do our work on toxic chemicals, which we won't be touching on today, but my main focus is on most of our climate and energy work. So here's a little overview of what I'm going to talk about. So first, just a quick outline of what CEFA is. That's our Clean Energy for All campaign. Then some of the climate and energy commitments that have been made in Idaho, which makes up a bulk of our work. Touch on the legislature and all the legislative work we've done. And then finally, clean transportation, where we have some really exciting new work that we're getting into that I'm pretty excited to share. So Clean Energy for All, I promise this is the only thing I'm going to read for you. Idaho must transition to 100% clean energy by or before 2050, not only in the electricity sector, but in transportation, heating, and cooling, in order to protect our communities, environment, and economy from the impacts of climate change. Conservation Voters for Idaho is working to achieve net zero emissions in an equitable way that benefits all Idaho communities. As clean energy costs fall and public approval increases, the greatest block to widespread implementation of clean energy is no longer technological or economic, but institutional and political. So I think it's really important, especially that final sentence, that we've seen that upwards of like 60 to 70% of Idahoans support transitioning to clean energy. And that's true across the political spectrum, so Democrats, independents, and Republicans, and across the age ranges and for both men and women. So it's widely supported here in Idaho, and it makes sense economically, which is why a lot of cities and businesses have lately been making those commitments and making that transition. It's because it's not just something that benefits our environment, but it's something that's economically beneficial for a number of reasons. So essentially what our goal is decarbonization. So the simplified version of decarbonization, people want to know, like, how do we get there to tackle climate change? I think the simplest way to look at it is two main steps. So one is clean up electricity, and two is electrify everything. So that's essentially about moving to clean energy sources for number one. And that's, the classics of like hydropower plus the renewables that you know a lot about, solar and wind. And then electrify everything is just essentially put everything on the grid. So once we have a clean grid, we can transition off of heating our homes with natural gas, which is essentially just methane, and powering our cars with gas. Once we can get those all on the grid and the grid is clean, that will address a lot of the challenges of climate change. Obviously, there's a lot more to it of thinking about some of the natural climate solutions, thinking about some of the sustainability issues. There's energy efficiency, which kind of fits into this a little bit. But these are kind of the two main steps that we think about and what a lot of our policies are kind of based on, and the policies that we pursue at CVI. This is just an overview of the commitments that we've seen in Idaho. And it's been really exciting over the last about 2.5, 3 years that we've seen all of these commitments start coming in towards clean energy. So we've had 11 commitments. I'll go through which ones they are in a little bit. And that's between Idaho cities, counties, and utilities that have all committed to clean energy, to hitting 100% clean energy. And each of those has set a different timeline and a different goal and a different way to get there, which I think is really important. But it's essential that they're setting that end goal, and then they're creating a concrete plan to get there, which essentially what we want to see happen is not just a resolution for acknowledging the importance of tackling climate change or acknowledging that clean energy is important, but actual concrete steps and a plan for how they're going to get there as a community. Right now, we're up to, it's actually over 635,000 residents who are living in a community that's committed to clean energy. That's either a city or county. And then for customers, it's 927,000 customers between Idaho Power and Avista and Idaho Falls Power that have all committed to clean energy. In Idaho Falls case, they've actually already hit that number or hit that goal. So they're committing to sustaining it. But I think that's really exciting. That's essentially a little over half of Idahoans are now are a customer of a utility that is committed to clean energy. So here's a little bit more about our clean energy commitments. Momentum is building towards Idaho clean energy future. And I think this is an important part of talking about our partners. So I just want to, before I move on, just acknowledge that all of this work is not something that CVI can accomplish alone, that it's happening both with our partners who are, a lot of them are elected officials, and a lot of them are volunteers and just local advocates, but there's also a lot of organizations we work with. So I just want to stop and acknowledge all of them because this work wouldn't be possible. So here's a few of the main ones we've worked with. Idaho chapter of Sierra Club, they've been a huge partner, especially in this commitments work, where we work really closely together with them on some of these communities. The PRC in Pocatello, who's part of the IORC, Idaho Conservation League, the Climate Action Coalition of the Wood River Valley, they were really instrumental up in Blaine County. And I'll talk a little bit about those commitments, which are really ambitious in a few minutes, but they were really a local leader in kind of shaping what happened in Blaine County. The Idaho Earth Guide, which is a website I think everyone should go check out. They just recently launched, but you should check it out. It's kind of a guide to how to live sustainability and think about climate and the environment in your day-to-day decisions. So that's a really great resource, and know a few people who've been working on that. So pretty excited about that. Snake River Alliance, the Nature Conservancy, they're doing a lot with like natural climate solutions. So some of that's like a lot of like the tree planting stuff. They work in ag. Inclusive Idaho, which you should check out tomorrow night. I think it's at 6 p.m. They're going to have a webinar. So I'd encourage everyone to go to CVI's Facebook page and you can sign up for their webinar. Citizens Climate Lobby, and then there's also just a lot of student-led groups. There's an exciting one now in Boise, run through the city of Boise, which is a youth climate council to help shape kind of the city's policy and the city's actions. But there's also a lot of student groups, whether they're clubs. There's one called the Water Club up in Blaine County. There's students getting together up in Moscow, and I know a lot of other cities, both the high school level, college level, some elementary schools, middle schools. A lot of them are pursuing starting up some sort of club so students can get more involved. So I just want to acknowledge all those partners before we move on, because they've all been kind of an essential part of our work. Looks like Josh is here, so maybe you have a question.
Yep, we do have a question in the Q&A regarding clean energy commitments. Are these commitments for 100% clean energy or 100% clean electricity, excluding heating, cooling, and transportation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can talk about that right now with the timelines. That's a very good question. So here's just a quick timeline. I'll share some of these and then get into what those commitments actually look like. So it all kind of started with Boise and Idaho Power making their commitments. And Idaho Power made theirs a little bit before, but there was kind of a joint work where the city was moving in that direction and Idaho Power was as well. So they kind of made them about the same time. And then Avista quickly followed. They're the utility up in northern Idaho. And then we had three more in 2019. I just want to highlight again, Idaho Falls is really exciting because they're already at 100% because of their hydropower. So they're working on a lot of other climate initiatives and clean energy initiatives, but their hydropower has allowed them to already hit that number. So they're making a resolution to stick to 100% clean electricity. And then in 2020, Meridian made an exciting commitment. And then the last four kind of happened jointly. So Blaine County, Haley, Ketchum, and Bellevue all made joint commitments. And these are the ones that, so some of them essentially, I can outline it with Meridian and then the last four. So Meridian set their goal to basically support the work of, to support what Idaho Power is doing, which is 100% clean electricity by 2045. And then they've also wanted to incorporate, they did a little differently where they essentially incorporated sustainability initiatives and into their decision-making process so that when they make their day-to-day decisions as a city, they're making sure that they're considering what the climate impact or the, I guess, sustainability impact is how they phrased it, of those decisions. Then for the last four, they've actually made the commitment to both clean electricity and clean energy. One of the challenges with this is just that different communities mean different things when they commit to clean energy versus clean electricity. But for those last four, they essentially mean they've set a goal for their city to be powered, or their city or county operations to be powered by 100% clean electricity by 2030. So that's meaning essentially every time you plug something in, it's coming from a clean electricity source. And then they've also set one for the community to have all of their electricity 100% by 2035. And then a final commitment of full clean energy by 2045. So for them, that means getting off of all fossil fuels in heating and cooling and transportation by 2045. So that's basically an all-encompassing clean energy goal. Some of the other ones, when they say clean energy, they really mean clean electricity. So it's just it's that there's not like a standardized term, and so some cities are just phrasing it differently. But I think that can be a little bit confusing because Idaho Power is committed to 100% clean energy by 2045, and they mean that their clean, that their electricity that they produce will be from clean sources. So hopefully that answered your question. If you have any follow-ups, you can let me know. I'm actually going to come back to this slide in a second, because following up on the last question, my next slides actually show that difference between what Meridian and Blaine County have done. So this is the part of the commitment for Meridian. And you can kind of see here when we go to Blaine County, you'll see kind of the differences in what they focus on. And that's kind of one of our goals with these clean energy commitments, is that they match the resources, the values, the goals and opportunities that each individual community has. So it's not just like a cookie cutter template of a commitment that we ask every community to make. It's something that needs to be shaped by the elected officials and the community members to reflect what their goals are. So for Meridian, their focus was a lot more on economic development and focusing on like those sustainability goals. So you'll see here just that they mention economic opportunities a lot and economic development. So they've kind of keyed in that to that aspect of moving towards clean energy and focusing on energy efficiency is an economic benefit for the city, both in terms of new companies wanting to move to Meridian where they understand there's that sustainability goal, and also just saving the city money. I know one of the things they had talked about was just that switching all of their streetlights to LEDs on a quicker timeline cost a little bit more in the short term, but it would save tens of thousands of dollars over a decade. So it just really meant an economic benefit for them, and they focused on the idea of those like stewardship practices, which you'll see in the first sentence of responsible resource use and stewardship practices. And they did not focus on the climate aspect of it, but instead those kind of economic benefits. And then if you look at Blaine County, theirs focuses a lot more on the changing climate and the impacts that has on a community that's so close to a lot of our outdoor areas. So they face a lot of the issues of greenhouse gases, create climate change, which increases wildfires, which is really damaging for a community like that. That's both because of where their homes are at and how close they are to the outdoors, and also just because a lot of their economy is based on tourism. So having that focus on a changing climate, it really reflects the difference in values that Blaine County versus Meridian have and their goals and what they want those to look like. And that shapes what each city's commitment looks like. Okay, so now I'm gonna pause to see if there are any questions before I go back up to City of Boise. Okay. So going back up, this is the City of Boise's work, and they've really been a leader not just locally but nationally in their climate initiatives, especially once Mayor McLean was elected. She's been really ambitious in the goals that she set out, and set out goals that are, I think, ambitious, but they're realistic and they're beneficial, and they're rooted in both necessity and what's beneficial for our community, which has really changed that. It's impressive that the city of Boise is moving a lot faster than cities that have a lot more resources. They're getting a lot more resources from their state. They're getting more support from their state on their climate policy. So it's really impressive just the work that the city of Boise's done in such a limited amount of time. One of the biggest things is creating the climate action division. So they have a new staff that's focusing on all of their climate initiatives. And these are just the things that are recently put into their funding last year that the city council and Mayor McLean supported for adding into the city of Boise's funding. And there's a lot of other initiatives that are not included in this. And most of those are going to be released in the climate action roadmap, which we're hoping will be released sometime in June. So I think everyone keep an eye on the city of Boise and their releases, and follow us on social media or sign up for our clean energy newsletter, and we'll give you updates on when that comes out and what it looks like. But these are some of the main funding things. And they've really city of Boise's really centered their climate action on both on like the economic recovery, which is especially important post-COVID, and on thinking about equity. So in that first one, if you see number 2 under climate and energy, I think is a really exciting one, of a climate economy accelerator and incubator. So that's a way to for the city to attract small businesses and companies that want to work on climate issues. And that I think is going to be a really big boost to our economy. The climate, what they call the climate economy, is one of the fastest growing industries in the US. And I think making sure that we can kind of be a hub of that is going to be a really big benefit for our city. And we'll see more when that roadmap comes out, what that actually is going to look like. And then in transportation, I'm going to talk about the canal pathways work a little bit later, but that's something that a lot of different organizations were excited about and saw as an opportunity. And the city of Boise listened to voters and listened to the advocates that represent their voters, and included that in their funding to have a canal pathways plan. And then some of those continued fleet electrification things. There's some really exciting, like the first all-electric garbage trucks. They're looking at moving a lot of their fleet to electrifying their fleet, which I know a number of the other cities have made commitments have done the same. That's something they know they can save money on the long term if they focus on that fleet electrification. And then finally, I think it's really important to highlight those two environmental justice notes down at the bottom. So an environmental justice and health equity report, and they're incorporating a lot of stuff into the roadmap and their future action to look at making sure that as we make this transition, it is equitable, and we're thinking about making sure all communities come along, which is really what we appreciate, because that's what a lot of the Clean Energy for All campaign is about. Is that as we make that transition, we're not leaving any communities behind, whether that's people of color, low-income communities, the communities that are not so much in Idaho, but in other states. There's a lot of communities that are heavily reliant on fossil fuel infrastructure, whether that's mining towns or towns that have natural gas plants. A lot of them, their economy is going to struggle when we make this transition. And so just thinking about the impacts that it has on those communities as we make a transition, I think is really critical. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about climate in the legislature. So a lot of our work recently in the legislature has been kind of defensive work of making sure that harmful policies are not passing that hurt the transition to electric vehicles or to clean energy, or on climate policies. So some of those, just this last year, we saw some really disappointing attempts to increase what is essentially taxes on electric vehicles. It was under the idea was that they were going to match taxes to electric vehicle taxes to the gas tax. But the rate they set was far higher than what would be equivalent to the road to the gas tax, especially with electric vehicle drivers tend to drive about half the distance as gas-powered vehicles, and they wanted to set the tax for electric vehicles at $300, which would have been significantly higher than the next highest state in the country, which was about $225, which is already extremely high. And the equivalent for the gas tax was much lower, and they wanted to add on, add on another fee that was about $29. So we just really don't see, as a lot of states are trying to incentivize moving to electric vehicles, we don't think that we should be punishing that transition, especially seeing the economic benefits it has. We have cobalt mining in Idaho that that goes to electric vehicles and electric batteries. So this is something that's just not would not be good for Idaho's economy or for the transition to electric vehicles. So luckily that was stopped after a lot of pushback. Another one that's unfortunately happened repeatedly is attempts to undermine Idaho's building and electricity codes. Also so essentially the goal with those was they wanted to make it so they couldn't incorporate energy efficiency codes or electricity codes, and they wouldn't allow cities to go past where the legislature set our standards, and that makes it really hard for kind of undermines local control, and it would have been harmful for homeowners It would essentially make it so builders could save a tiny amount of money by not doing energy efficiency standards, which would end up costing homeowners a lot in the long run in their energy costs and not really save them any money. Luckily, those have all been stopped so far, but we're unfortunately expecting those to come back in the future. But we really have appreciated with all of these the public support from our members and from people like you on this call that have joined in to kind of push back on the legislature when they try to pass these. Another one is the Idaho education standards. So that was recently an attempt to take out climate change out of the education standards, which I think is really disappointing. We should be following the science and understanding this is a real issue that impacts Idaho. And fortunately, we also played a role in stopping that. And then the last one is actually a really positive note. This was in 2019 that we actually had Idaho's first hearing on climate change. The focus of it was not on the causes of climate change, to keep it away from being a political fight, essentially. We focused on the impacts, and there was a lot of great speakers in there. You can read a couple of blogs on our website if you want to check out what happened with the hearing. I think there's a lot of progress in just starting that conversation at a statewide level and making people understand the impacts that this is going to have on our state. So I'll pause there and see if anybody has any questions about the CVI's legislative work. Okay, so next I'm going to talk about clean transportation, which I think is one of the things I'm most excited about, and our focus on multimodal transportation. Essentially, multimodal is exactly what it sounds like. We want there to be opportunities for multiple modes of transportation. A lot of our cities have been built purely for automotive transportation, which is not what's best for people. We want people to have other opportunities if they want to take public transportation, if they want to be able to walk, if they want to bike. We need to build our system so that people have the opportunities to use whatever transportation method they choose. So one of the things we focused on is, especially recently, is electrifying our school bus fleet. So here's some statistics I want to share. That in terms of health, diesel pollution inside of a bus can be up to 5 times higher than outside of a bus. So that's when we put students on a school bus and send them to school, they're breathing in 5 times the emissions that you would be if you were just walking by in the street. That's because a lot of the diesel buses, just some of the exhaust goes into it. I know talking to someone recently was saying that they remember the taste of being outside of a school bus when they were a kid and waiting to get on, just like the taste of those diesel fumes. So I just think that's something that we need to think about, is like that we have people who can remember the taste of that, and they're experiencing that diesel fumes with some of our most vulnerable populations, our youth. And there's 110,000 children in Idaho take the bus to get to school, and they travel 25 million miles per year. That's how many miles our school buses throughout the state are traveling. So this really is it makes up a pretty significant, and I think far larger chunk of our transportation emissions than people realize. And it's something that's directly impacting our youth because they're the ones who are breathing it in most directly. And also, I think it's important to point out that it's not just the students who are breathing in these fumes, that it's the school bus drivers that are driving these buses year after year. So everything the students breathe in, all of our school bus drivers are having to breathe in as well. So that's why we're supporting what's called the Clean Commute for Kids Act. That's something that's happening at a national level, which has been led a lot by a coalition that includes LCV CHISPA, and LCV, League of Conservation Voters, is CVI's national affiliate, and CHISPA is one of their programs, and they've been really leading on the initiatives to electrify school buses. So they've helped worked with a couple congressmen and women to pass the Clean Commute for Kids Act, which we're hoping will be rolled up into the American Jobs Plan, which I think I would encourage everyone to go out and look at the fact sheet, the White House fact sheet for the American Jobs Plan. It is a infrastructure bill, but it includes a significant amount of clean energy and climate infrastructure, and that includes funding for transitioning transitioning the bus fleet in the United States to a fully electric fleet. Excuse me. And the Clean Commute for Kids Act would include, it's about $25 billion for electrifying the fleet, which LCV Chispa thinks can electrify about half the school buses in the United States, and include funding for the charging infrastructure, which is obviously necessary, training for school bus drivers and for maintenance staff, because you actually have to drive electric buses a little bit differently because of the way they can recharge as you brake. So it includes kind of all those things for a school, for school districts to kind of take advantage of those electric buses. And so what we're doing is both supporting passing that Clean Commute for Kids Act, which I'd encourage everyone to go on to. We've made a couple social media posts about it, but you can also look at LCV Chispa. They have a petition up that they're collecting signatures on, which I think is really important, especially now as different kind of priorities are competing to get an American Jobs Plan. I think this one's really important. So I'd encourage everyone to go out and support it. And the second thing we're doing is helping prepare Idaho school districts to take advantage of those funding opportunities. So a lot of this is just reaching out to school districts, their transportation staff, their superintendents, their school boards, and making sure that they're aware of this potential opportunity, as well as some other, some what's called DERA funds, DERA funds that currently exist at the national level, and just making sure that they're aware of what it would mean to transition, what the funding looks like currently, what the funding is going to look like in the future, what the benefits are going to be, and figure out kind of what some of the roadblocks are for them, so we can help them figure those out and take advantage of those fundings when they are available. So some of this has been that direct outreach. We're also in late June going to be presenting along with a couple other groups that I mentioned earlier. And we're going to be helping lead a panel for the Idaho Association of Pupil Transport Conference. So essentially that's it's an association of the different transportation staff for school districts, along with a lot of superintendents. They meet once a year to discuss school transportation, especially mostly on buses. And so we're going to be presenting to them and hosting 2 vendors that sell electric buses, as well as 2 school districts who have already made the transition to electric buses, to kind of share what that transition has been like. And we're also really excited that we're going to have at least 1 electric bus brought down by Western Mountain is going to bring one down, and then hopefully Line Electric will bring an electric school bus, so that everyone will be able to see what those are like and try them out and see how they drive differently, kind of experience those firsthand. And then we're looking for other opportunities for students and school boards and local elected officials to be able to see what those electric buses are like, so they're more familiar and comfortable with the idea of that transition. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is the Canals Connect Community Coalition. So this is a large coalition that CVI is a part of, that includes both a lot of the conservation organizations that I mentioned earlier, along with a lot of the local transportation organizations, mostly operating in the Treasure Valley. And the goal is to essentially, we have these canals that go throughout the Treasure Valley and connect a lot of areas that don't have access to bike paths or walking paths for pedestrians. And we have these canals that are sitting right there, and they have these open pathways next to them. So it's about taking advantage of those paths and getting them open to the public and safe for the public to travel on. And I think that's a great opportunity for safe bicycle pathways, especially with one of the challenges in the Treasure Valley is that the cities don't have control of their own roads. And so that's all controlled by ACHD. And so finding other ways that they can focus on transportation and provide some safe routes for, safe routes for kids to get to school, safe routes for bicyclists to get to work. And I'd encourage everyone to go check out. There's a Facebook page, the Canals Connect Community Coalition Facebook page, which has a lot of the organizations listed on there and lists some of the initiatives that we're working on. I'm really excited about that just because I think it's great to get the different groups together, and we have a lot of elected officials who join us on those calls. And when we do our monthly calls, they join us and they're really excited about it. The city of Boise has put in that funding for the Canal Pathways Plan, and a number of other cities have actually already put in work on developing their canal pathways and have plans established. So I think once the city of Boise does, we'll hopefully be able to create a network throughout the Treasure Valley that connect a lot of those different communities. Okay, and that's where I'm going to wrap up. I wrapped up a little quicker than I was expecting, but I will now open it up to questions.
Give you guys just a minute or two to type questions, since I know that can sometimes be a little tricky.
And while we're waiting to see if anyone comes in, I just encourage anyone to go check out our website. You can sign up for the Clean Energy newsletter if you want to get more information on what our climate and energy policies look like. And also just want to thank everyone for your support of CVI. This work would not be possible without our members, both the donations and being willing to take action. So we really appreciate all the support by CVI's members. So we have one question: is there a date for the event to show electric buses? So the Idaho Association of Pupil Transport Conference is in Boise on June 23rd, but that's currently kind of a closed event to the school board, to school staff from around Idaho. But we're working on hopefully finding an opportunity to get one of those buses that's coming out for like a more public event where people can check it out. So I'd keep an eye on our sign up for a Clean Energy newsletter, and we'll share that date when it comes out. But if it does happen, I'd expect it to be somewhere a couple days before or a couple days after the 23rd. And we're also hoping to Valley Regional Transit is getting a few electric buses in the near future. So really excited about that, and they'll have some opportunities there to go out and check them out. So make sure you're following VRT, and then up in Blaine County, their Mountain Rides they're getting some electric buses in soon. So if you live up there, you can check out the buses that they have. Those should be coming in. Those are both, I should clarify, those are both for public transportation. But yeah, for the school buses, hopefully we're trying to see if we can coordinate to have something around the 23rd. So good question.
Looks like we've got a few more questions in the Q&A. So first question is, what can residents do to support CVI's initiatives?
I'd say really two things. One is just being prepared to kind of take action. So again, I know I've said it a couple of times, but signing up for our Clean Energy newsletter, that's where we share a lot of the opportunities for taking action. And then also, if you are interested in helping work in your own community on a clean energy resolution, you can send me a direct email. I'll put it or I'll let Josh maybe put it in the chat. That's kind of our goal, is to find local advocates who are excited about moving to clean energy in their community or supporting current commitments, because I think it's a lot more effective when that's being led by locals. And so our kind of the way we work is that we find locals who understand the, their community and the partners that are available in their community, and then we provide some of the resources and information to make that commitment. And then the last one, obviously, this is the green tie event. So it's really helpful for us as an organization where your donations are critical for our work, and that just having the funding to do outreach is essential. So check out the Green Tie website and see what's on there. But yeah, if you have any specific questions about what you can do, or if you want to share, if you email me and just share what you're interested in, we're also very open to just helping people pursue their own kind of objectives or connecting people. If I know of another organization who's working on something that you're more interested in, I can make that connection and make that introduction, because I know we've done a lot of that with our partners, where a lot of different organizations have their own niche. So it's about like finding where volunteers and advocates can plug in. So if you email me and let me know what you're interested in, I can make a connection or let you know what we're working on that kind of lines up with your interest areas.
So another question we have, Stephanie would like to know about CVI's views on nuclear power.
Nuclear is it's a challenge in Idaho. We do have Idaho National Laboratories, who's the nuclear research agency essentially for the US. So they have some kind of exciting initiatives that they're working on, but we don't, as an organization, we don't actively push for or support nuclear energy, just because I think there are some opportunities there that other groups are supporting. But we think that the best avenues are through other renewables, through the current functioning hydropower. We do support the removal of some of the dams, but some of the functioning ones plus the renewables is what we kind of see the path forward being. And so we kind of leave that to other organizations on the nuclear front. So we don't actively oppose it, but it's not something that we're encouraging.
Great. And another question is, do you see any potential state action happening that may help support communities and businesses with clean energy goals?
At the statewide level, I'd say the biggest one is if you look up the Volkswagen funding, there's a lot of funding there that the DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, is working to distribute, that's for charging infrastructure. So they split their, I should back up, Volkswagen cheated on their emissions test and got some significant fines from the federal government. And some of that funding was given to state governments to kind of compensate for those emissions. And so Idaho divided theirs up into a vehicle replacement plan and then also charging infrastructure. And so I think the charging infrastructure is one is really exciting, and local communities can actually apply to get a charger for electric vehicles put in their community. And that's a huge benefit for some of the rural communities that have applied and got those, because essentially it'll take anywhere from like 30 to 90 minutes for an electric vehicle to charge. So if you're putting in a charging infrastructure in your community, when a tourist or someone passing by, when they need to charge their vehicle, it'll be your town that they're stopping in. And while it's charging, a lot of people are going out and they're going to local restaurants, going to local businesses. So I think it can be a really big boost to small rural economies, especially the ones along major routes, to take advantage of that state level funding for EV infrastructure. And this isn't at the state level, but I should add that the American Jobs Plan does include a significant amount of funding for building out EV infrastructure. So I think that'll be another big advantage.
Okay, and then we have another question in the chat. In order to get the residential homes to be gas-free would be an expensive proposition. Are there plans to change building codes to focus on electric versus gas heat, water heating, and cooking for future homes? Can't imagine having to change my home's gas use right now.
Yeah, that's one of those things that we think about how we make this transition when we talk about clean energy for all and thinking about how these transitions impact communities. It is one of those things that we don't want to make like any sort of immediate mandate that people have to get rid of their current homes like gas infrastructure. That's not something that making that transition is not something that individuals should have to foot the bill for. So a lot of that is it is important to make those building codes that either require or incentivize new builds to be just focused on electric and not include that natural gas heating and cooling in there. So a lot of it's about like those new builds. And I think that's going to be an opportunity in the future, hopefully to get federal funding to do house remodels and pay for that kind of thing. So we want to make sure that as we make this transition, it's not something where there's some huge financial burden falling on people where they have to try to pay for a transition. So anything that we're making a transition on, we think that's something that essentially the either should be like economic incentives for it to happen or standards for new builds or funding from the federal or state government or local government to help make that transition for people. And I know the city of Boise does have some funding for energy efficiency projects that some people can apply for. That hasn't been pushed heavily in the past, but there is some money available there. And Mark, I'll add if you ever want to chat about this, feel free to send me an email, and that goes to anyone if you want to chat over email or call me or set up a Zoom meeting. I'm always open to discuss these kind of things because we want to know what concerns people have about the transition, what it's going to look like for them.
Awesome. Thank you, Ryan. So it looks like we've got our questions asked. And we really appreciate those insightful questions. Those were some great things to ask about. And I do really want to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate you participating in Green Tie 2021. And we do hope you'll check out some of the other panels we have happening this week. Tonight, you can hear from our inaugural cohort of boards and commissions fellows, as well as some of our mentors. That's happening at 6 p.m. this evening. And then as Ryan mentioned, tomorrow our partners Inclusive Idaho will be speaking at 6 p.m., as well as a really fascinating panel on public lands at the noon hour tomorrow. And then on Thursday at noon, we'll be talking about our elections work. And then our keynote will be happening at 7 p.m. on Thursday. So I encourage you to sign up for any and all of those sessions. Those links to sign up are available on the Green Tie website, which again is cvidaho.org/greentie. We do also have an online auction happening right now, which has some really great items for everyone that you know, whether you're into donuts or hiking or drinking beer. We have items for everyone. So I do encourage you to go check out that online auction. And Josh will post that link in the chat. And then as Ryan mentioned, Green Tie is our annual fundraiser and we are a donor supported organization. So if you're feeling inspired by our work, please do head over to our website and make a gift to support CVI. Right now we are also, we have a $25,000 match for all the funds that are raised during Green Tie. So your dollar can go twice as far if you give during our Green Tie week. So we do really appreciate your time today. Again, check out the rest of Green Tie and don't hesitate to reach out if you have any more questions. And thank you all for joining us today.